The seventh round of the sensitive mouse. Okay, one more. Couple more. What about that one?
7 angels with 7 vials pouring them out.
7 angels with 7 bowls of vials containing the 7 last plagues. The 7 last plagues. Yep. So that's another pattern of 7. 7 mountains and 7 kings. And the last one. Yeah. 7 horns, 7 eyes on the Lamb. So those are all an incredible number of patterns of 7 repeated over and over in Revelation. So, little emoji quiz. Thank you for your participation. That was fun. And this is also kind of interesting that we've looked at the blessings in Revelation. There's 7 blessings. And so when we look at the 7 blessings, here they are here. Revelation 1 verse 3, a blessing to those who accurately study and then practically apply the message. Revelation 14, a blessing is pronounced upon those who are resurrected to fulfill the prophecy. 16, a blessing for those who watch and who are ready for Christ's return. A blessing for those who partake in the marriage supper of the Lamb. A blessing upon those who inherit eternal life. A blessing for those who practically apply the book of Revelation in their lives. And a blessing for those who keep Christ's commandments. And there's 7 of them. So that's kind of cool. So let's now look at 7s in Jewish life, because this is actually it blew my mind a little bit when you think, and what I was trying to do before was look at some of the patterns in life that we have that we don't realise that even 7s are kind of happening. Now we think about what it was like to be a Jew living in Bible times, and let's consider some of the patterns of 7 that were built into their everyday life. So the first one is the Sabbath. So every 7th day was the Sabbath. Sabbath, day of rest, day of worship, reflection and completion. So that was on a weekly basis. And then if we looked on an annual basis, every year the Jews had the Feast of Weeks, which was Pentecost. It was 7 weeks long. Pentecost, 50, 7 sevens, 49, so it was the 50th. And it was between the first fruit of barley and the full harvest. So that was every year. So we've got a pattern every week, every year. And you guessed it, the next pattern is every 7th year. So every 7th year was called the year of release. The land was left to be fallow, so it was left to not be used so that it could recover. And it was also the year that there was removal of burden of debt and show generosity to slaves. So that was every 7 years. And then probably, well, depending on how old you lived, at least once in your lifetime, potentially twice, there was every 7 times 7 years, so every 49th year, there was then the year of Jubilee. And the year of Jubilee was about joy and rejoicing, trumpets were blowing, God's abundant goodness. It was a year of festivity. So these were the 7s in Jewish life on a daily, annual, 7 annual, and 7 annual basis. It was just, you would have had, if you didn't realise this pattern of 7 was in your life, you kind of need to be slapped around the head because it was right there. So let's read what the book says about some of these things, because I found it really interesting. 7 is an important number in the Bible. It's associated, as we've talked about, with the power of God in creation and with the completion of his work. Exodus 20, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. The 7th day of the Israelite week became a day of rest and worship, and taught about God's intention to fill the earth with his glory. As the writer to the Hebrews said, There remaineth therefore a Sabbath rest for the people of God. The year of release. In the Israelites' calendar, the 7-day week was just the start of how the number 7 affected everyday life. Each year the Jews celebrated a feast of weeks, or Pentecost, meaning 50th, i.e. 7 sevens. These 7 weeks marked the period between the first fruit of barley harvest and the full harvest. Every 7th year the land was left to lie fallow, requiring God's people to rely on him completely. The year of release was also an opportunity to show generosity and to remove the burden of debt and slavery. So if you think about that term we were talking about before of anticipation, if you were in debt or you were a slave, you would be anticipating and looking forward to that seventh year. And certainly kind of, there was a big party on, and there was a lot of things on, you'd be anticipating that as well. So think of the Jubilee. As the weekly Sabbath extended to the Feast of Weeks, the year of release extended to a period of 7 times 7 years. After every 49 years, a Jubilee was celebrated, which was a year of joy and rejoicing. When trumpets were blown, God's abundant goodness was commemorated with much festivity. So the sevenfold pattern thus formed part of everyday life in Bible times. We've only got dice and 7-Up and dwarfs to kind of associate with, but back then it was a lot more real. 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 years, and finally 7 times 7 years. On each occasion, the faithful man or woman in Israel was reminded of God's love and care and the day of the great day of rest when the kingdom will be established. So if the 7-day week was to remind Israel of God's purpose and his ways, the constantly repeated 7s in the book of Revelation remind readers that his purpose is still being worked out and the final rest is still to come. So that anticipation is still, we're looking ahead. We're looking to that year of release. We're looking to that year of Jubilee. So let's move on to the next one. And so that's just a reflection on those takeaways. So we've talked about that anticipation that's built in to the pattern 7, which is repeated over and over again. So we talked about the, and this is the sevenfold structure of Revelation. So it's like a telescope, and so as you pull each part out, there's 7 on top of 7 on top of 7. So there's 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 vials, 7 thunders. And I was trying to look around the house for a telescoping kind of prop. Couldn't find one. Probably could find one in the Sunday school room. But that gives you an idea to think of that kind of telescopic view. And then there's a little build there, so you show how that kind of the scroll unseals. So let's read about this. And this is also called, as Ben took us through, this is called the Jericho pattern. The reason why it's the Jericho pattern, because the 7s, 7 times around the wall, 7 times, and then 7 times the ram horn was blown. So that kind of pattern of 7, again, the hope, the expectation, and the anticipation, and the confidence that is what is coming, is all built into this pattern of 7. So at the heart of the message in Revelation, there are 3 sequences of 7. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 last plagues. The 7th seal opens up into the 7 trumpets, and the 7 trumpet sounds the start of the 7 plagues. These great sequences of important events divide into 3 successive sections, the period of time between John receiving the message of Revelation and Jesus returning to earth to establish the kingdom. This central section of Revelation mainly explains forthcoming political events. There are also religious events, and these are explained in the book later on. So we shall need to refer to this 3-fold division on a number of occasions as we work through Revelation. So for those of you that are planning or doing chapters from this book or coming to those classes, this structure here we're going to see over and over again and repeat it. And the book says it's sufficient at this stage for us to see how this Jericho pattern, as we might call it, is used to present the information in Revelation. So that's the sevenfold structure. And then there's a final kind of introduction, which is really cool. Not only have you got the 7 sections, but there's also, Revelation can be split into these 7 sections, where there is an opening vision, and then there is a development in God's purpose. And what's really cool about this is the vision is then revealed in the development, and it finishes with chapter 20 to 22, the establishment of the kingdom. So that pattern of 7 and that reveal, that glory, is all built into the structure. So let me read a little bit more about what this the structure that we've got up on the slide talks about, because this is quite beautiful. The whole book of Revelation can also be divided into 7 parts, each having an opening vision, which is a cameo or a snapshot of the kingdom, and each capable of being subdivided in 7 parts. And these 7 main divisions are shown on the slide behind me. And later in other chapters, we are going to delve into these subsections. But as with the 7s in Israel's calendar and the 7-fold judgment on Jericho, the final or 7th incident is always the one that's being anticipated. Think back to, if you're a debtor, the labourer waited eagerly for the day of rest. And if you're out in the field working morning till night, you are looking forward to that day of rest. Some of us are labouring, but not all of us labour in the heat of the day, out on the tools. So looking forward, anticipating that day of rest, is maybe not something that we feel in modern days like the Israelites did. Debtors and slaves looked forward to the year of release with significant anticipation. The nation as a whole made plans. You can think about the lead up. I mean, we're getting ready for the ecclesial camp, and the anticipation of that, the anticipation of Bible school, all the plans that go into that. But you think about that year of Jubilee, the anticipation, the whole nation would make plans to celebrate the Jubilee. And then if we think about Jericho, the children of Israel had faith that Jericho would be destroyed to allow them to enter the promised land. So in these opening visions, and it really is the segue to chapter 6, which is going to be covered next week. In Revelation 2, each 7-fold sequence always looks forward to the completion of God's purpose. And this is emphasised by the fact that every section starts with a vision of the kingdom and is completed, as I said, only when the kingdom is established in the 7th development of the 7th vision. And so those kingdom visions is going to be the focus of the chapter next week. So let's go through these visions. The first one is the opening vision is one like the Son of Man. It's in chapter 1. And the development in God's purpose is the letters to the 7 ecclesias in Asia. The second, the throne in heaven, which is chapters 4 and 5. The development in God's purpose is the 7 sealed scroll. So this is where the emoji quiz is kind of coming back to life. The third, multitude no man can number, that's in chapter 7. And the development in God's purpose is seen in the 7 trumpets of chapter 8 and 9. The rainbowed angel in chapter 10, and that's the development of apostasy in chapters 11 to 13, and then also 17 and 18. The 5th vision is the Lamb on Mount Zion, chapter 14, and the development is the 7 last plagues. The 6th vision is God's judgments, which is in chapter 15, and the development is seen in chapters 10, a little bit earlier, the 7 thunders. And as we talked about, the opening vision, the marriage of the Lamb in chapter 19, which is the 7th vision, and that is completed, the development with the establishment of the kingdom, which is chapters 20 to 22. So that is that's chapter 5 in a nutshell. But as I said, I've got some bonus material because as I was doing some research and some reading, I came across some other stuff which is related to 7, related to the structure of Revelation, not necessarily in the book, but I thought it's bonus material, so I wanted to cover it. So let's get into it now. So some bonus material. The first thing, and again, and I kind of don't want to bombard us with too many kind of structures of 7 in Revelation, but the fact that you can take a book like Revelation and section it off 7 ways, and then almost start from fresh and structure it into 7 ways, and then come up with another pattern that's structured 7 ways, it actually shows you the depth of the message. You can probably find 7 structures of 7 in the book, which is cool. So, and some of you will be familiar with this. Some words I can't get my tongue around. This is called chiastic structure, chiastic poetry. I can't say that word. Some of you that are better scholars can say the word properly. But this is what that structure is. And it is God uses the structure in the Bible quite a lot. And it's this inverted Hebrew poetry. So this is an example from Psalms. And so what happens is you've got the opening, and then it comes in and inverts back. And so this opening sentence is linked to this final sentence. The yellow is linked to this one. The purple is linked to this one, and then in the middle. So you kind of have this, you go into the story, and then you come out of the story. And it's almost like a kind of a chevron. That's called the chiasmic chaos, and it's kind of like it's a cool word to say if you can actually say it properly. I just can't get my head around it. So chiastic structure. So this is an example from Psalm 135. The idols of the heathen are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they speak not. They have eyes, but they see not. They have ears, but they hear not. Neither is there any breath in the mouths. They who make them are like unto them, so are all they who put their trust in them. There are a remarkable number of these examples in the Bible. We just read them, we read passages, but if only you saw the chiastic structure to verses and sections, it's revealed everywhere in the Bible. Okay, are you ready? Guess what Revelation has? It has a chiastic structure in it, which I thought was pretty cool. So here it is here. And it's the inverted structure of Revelation. And guess what? It's 7 on the way in and then 7 on the way out. So there again, you get this reveal. You get the revelation of the structure. So this is another attempt at how you can structure Revelation and how you can separate it out. So the introduction, warning and appeal. I should have colour-coded this. So you had the yellow and the blues, but you get the picture. So the introduction, warning and appeal is linked to the ending, which is the epilogue of the warning and appeal. The multitudinous Son of Man, linked to the bride is the New Jerusalem, which is the end. The messages to the ecclesia, the conquest of sin and death. The heavenly worship and sealed book, the overthrow of false worship. The Christianizing of Rome, judgment of the Holy Roman Empire. Overthrow of the Roman Empire, the destruction of Babylon the Great. And then in the middle, chapters 10, 11, 12 and 13, the punishment of the persecuting power and the development of the persecuting power. So there again is a chiastic structure revealed in Revelation with a pattern of 7 with an arrow. Micah and I were at a Bible school in America a couple of years ago, and there was this guy that a brother got up and did it was an evening class, wasn't it? And he was like, we have never found someone who is as excited about chiastic structure as this brother. He was just jumping on the platform about he was so enthusiastic. And he was taking us through, this structure, but also where it's found all through the Bible. And for him and for us, after listening to him, you can see the revelation of the patterns through the structure, which is pretty neat. And then the final thing I found, which I thought was worth sharing. Oh, here's a diagram that is linked to that kind of the telescopic view, and then that kind of just brings in, again, as I said, part of my disclaimer is traditional Christadelphian thinking, but this is the 3 great earthquakes of the apocalypse. Probably don't want to steal the thunder of whoever's doing chapters, whatever, later on, because this is covered, but it shows you these periods of time that are linked to, that are referenced in Revelation. So there's a cool image. But this last part I thought was really neat, and it's linked to the pattern of 7 and the 7 letters to the 7 ecclesias. So the Isle of Patmos, and it's always good to see kind of where we are. So this is modern day Turkey. Where's my? I need a pointer. This is actually Gallipoli up here. And so this is Turkey, this is Crete, these are the Greek islands. And so, but back in the day, this was the Isle of Patmos in the Aegean. Patmos, one of the Spilades Islands, 45 kilometres southwest of the island of Samos, approximately the same distance from the coast of Asia at its greatest width. It was a rocky, barren, desolate. It was a place of exile for Roman prisoners who were used as mine labourers. Not as relevant as the bit that I'm going to show you. We've already covered the letters to the 7 ecclesias. But what's really cool about this is, when you look at it on the map, and this is where the message came from, which was Patmos, it makes absolute sense that if you're a messenger delivering the letter to the 7 ecclesias, you would deliver it in the order of the route that you would go. You would come over here, you'd get a boat, you'd come over here, and you'd get your satchel with your letters, and you would go on a little bit of a tiki tour, dropping it off. Like if we were doing 7 letters to the ecclesias in New Zealand, we'd go down to Hamilton, we'd then go across to Tauranga, we'd then go down the line to Hawke's Bay, we'd then go to Wellington, we'd get on the ferry, we'd go across and we'd drop the letters off, either in the car or in the satchel. And guess what the order is? So the final message of Christ is addressed to 7 selected ecclesias in Asia Minor, and through them to ecclesias of all ages, and the order of the letters follows the logical path of the messenger delivering. And so when you look in Revelation and you look at the 7 ecclesias, you just see them as kind of the letters to the ecclesias. I've always seen them as the letters to the ecclesia. But guess what? The first letter is to Ephesus, then Smyrna, then Pergamon, then Thyatira, then Sardis, then Philadelphia, Laodicea. Put it on the map, it all makes sense, or it makes a different type of sense. And guess what? We haven't talked about this. 7 candlestick. So that's neat. So that's the end of my material. And well, it's not my material; it's the material that's in chapter 5. I thoroughly enjoyed reviewing the book. I think it's actually. I grew up kind of a little bit daunted by Revelation. I was all a bit scared by it. But this book has a way of actually explaining it in quite simple thoughts and structure. And so I'd encourage everyone to dig into it a bit more. And every time you see 7-Up in the store, just like Darren on Sunday, peas and carrots, we're not going to be able to think of Darren's message of the exhort on Sunday, which was prayer needs to match with watching, and I thought we need a little bit of a visual clue. So every time you think of 7-Up, think of the message of 7 in Revelation, and particularly the theme of anticipation of what is coming, and the structure that is being left for us to see that message revealed in the final book of the Bible. So I open it up for comments and questions and other 7s that you've thought of.
Walking
Yeah.
around Jericho 7 times.
Yeah, yeah. And we I didn't go too much into the Jericho because that was a large part of the chapter that Ben had done. But he did talk about the pattern, and I think he fessed up and revealed that he'd stole it from his mother. That she'd sent him a few images and kind of different things around that kind of scroll and the telescope. So. And Mike has got a really cool diagram in her Bible, but I was looking at it, it's very similar to the slide that I've got around that kind of telescope.
Just one to add to your sevens, people have probably heard of Bible numerology before, whereby you've got the script, also dealt with as a numerical value, so the letters each have a numerical value, so therefore the scribes will go through and count up the letters and put the value in the margin. That's all based on 7 too.
Right. So Bible numerology has got 7 at the kind of the core of it, right? Yeah. Yeah. I sat through a class in the US, it was last year, and the brother was talking about Bible numerology, and he must have been like a statistician or a mathematician because he was like doubling numbers and tripling numbers and subtracting numbers, and by the second slide, he just, I was like, okay, can we start back at 7? Because it was like, but I think that stuff gets really complex, but also pretty cool if you can keep up with it. I failed that class, but it's exciting.
Since I left school, they invented prime numbers. Is 7 a prime number?
Because it can't be divided by anything else, right?
Some mathematician.
Yeah, it can't be divided by another number, therefore it's a prime number, right? Yeah, like 6 is times 2, 7. It's only a prime number, I think the definition of prime number, if I'm mistaken, is the number can only be divided by itself in 1. That's the only method of a prime. So 8 times 2, it's not a prime number. 1, then 3, 7, 11. 12 is 6 times 2, 4 times 3, so it's not a prime. So it's kind of there's a perfectness in it, but an imperfectness in it as well. And even kind of like you can get into it, like again, I'm not totally into this, but if you look at kind of architectural design and some of those design principles, they always use like the pillars. They don't put 6 pillars in a building. They always make it kind of, because you can't have, symmetry sometimes doesn't work with design and architecture. So it actually, some of those old buildings that are stunning to look at, you actually look at them and they've got patterns in there.
And Julia will tell you that the major bloom in your floral arrangement should have an odd number.
Yeah, similar kind of thing. We'll critique the supper and see if that's laid out in the patterns of 7. I can see there's 7 slices of watermelon there, so Cheryl's been listening. Yeah. So,
So does the standard 19th century interpretation have anything to do with really applying those 7s? Or is it just they observe the pattern and don't put their nice historical explanation into the 7s?
you mean the scrolls, the telescope?
Yeah, well, yeah.
This one or this one?
Well, you talked about this beautiful pattern. So when they do all the years for this and the years for that, do they match into that 7 or are they a bit random?
I'm not an expert on that, so I can't answer it. Good question. I just don't feel qualified to answer.
Because you think there must be some kind of logic to the extension of the, 7 to, like God did 7 times 7 for Jubilee.
Yeah.
For those telescopic things.
Yeah.
Having anything to do with 7. I'll leave the question on the table.
Yeah.
I'll be forgotten by next time, so.
You can see why it's called the Book of Revelation, because the word, as I understand it, comes from the Greek word apocalyptus, and it's got various meanings to it, and you've covered some of those meanings tonight. It means appearing, coming, lightened, manifestation, revealed.
Mm.
So, you know, it's an extremely well appointed word in terms of the book of Revelation. It does all those things, right? Particularly the Jews pointed out tonight, it's the revealed side of it.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties in really nicely to what Jeremy was talking about. I think in the opening class we were doing the overview, and he was talking about like Revelation's like, you know, you watch a play, and a play's got to have a good script. It's got to have a good, like, you know, got to have a good character, and all of the characteristics of what makes a play is actually like it's in the book. So, you know, was I listening properly? Yeah.
Because the other thing, when we think about it, it's the revelation of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
All those things. So, as you pointed out, you know, the depth and the breadth of the book is absolutely intriguing. If you include which we should do, include the element which is the revelation of Jesus Christ. So, it's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
You turn off the recording.